Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me or if there's an ad playing. So I'm just going to talk a bit of nonsense for a while until hopefully the ad finishes. Um, this is my very first virtual author visit and my first time using Ustream. So hopefully it will all go well. And if not, I'm sure somebody will tell me. Um, it's a real honor to be able to speak with all of you. If you're having trouble hearing me or anything, just send me a message and I'll try to fix things. Um, Again, my name is Lauren McLaughlin, and I'm the author of the book Scored, which is right here. I'm also the author of the novels Cycler and Recycler. But I thought today I would talk to you about Scored because I'm still really excited about it, and I think it has quite a lot of relevance given what's happening in the world today. Um, so I just wanted to give you a little introduction about how I came to write this book, what inspired it, um, because it's unlike other stories. It was actually inspired by some firsthand experiences I had. Um, it was about 5 years ago. I was living in a pretty dangerous area of London, and I would see cars with smashed in windows and their stereos torn out all the time. Then one day I noticed two very interesting things. No more cars with smashed in windows and surveillance cameras everywhere. And I remember feeling very creeped out by all of those surveillance cameras and by the sense that I was constantly being watched. But I also felt a lot safer. This was a light bulb moment for me. I already knew the arguments against ubiquitous surveillance. I had even previously expressed my concern that England was sleepwalking into a surveillance state, to use the familiar phrase. But what I never realized until that moment was just how seductive surveillance could be. When I moved back to the US, there was a debate raging about high stakes standardized testing in the schools. And once again, though I knew the arguments against it, I began to see why such a thing was so seductive. Who wouldn't want a clean, objective way to evaluate teachers and improve schools? So I started thinking, what would happen if you combined ubiquitous surveillance with high stakes testing? What if, instead of taking those annoying bubble tests, which we all hate, students were simply observed in their day-to-day lives by surveillance cameras so numerous you hardly even notice them anymore? And what if a software program could crunch all of that data along with information about your web habits, phone conversations, schoolwork, and emails, and produce a monthly score that represented your overall mental fitness? It seems devious, nearly unimaginable, and yet at the same time, almost inevitable. And given how much we're already sharing with Facebook, on Twitter, and how much surveillance we're already constantly under, I'm beginning to see that my fictional world is becoming closer and closer to reality all the time. Facebook already knows more about me than most of my friends do. Maybe it's just a short step from that to being reduced to a score entirely. Ever taken the SAT? The majority of US colleges and universities rely on it to filter out students. And the SAT doesn't even do what it claims to do very well. It was invented to predict a college freshman's academic performance. But do you know how often it accurately makes this prediction? 17% of the time. That means 4 out of 5 times the SAT gets it wrong. And yet we're still taking it. We're still being scored. And I have a feeling we're going to be scored even more in the future. It's just too seductive. So that's why I wrote this book, and I hope you'll check it out and let me know what you think of it, and let me know what you think of the ideas that I'm dealing with in this book, because I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm much more interested as a writer in asking questions than I am in providing answers. So I'd love to hear, even if you haven't read the book, about what you think of these kinds of issues. Do you feel safe when you see surveillance cameras, or do you feel invaded, for example? That's it. Ask away. Houston Library asks, how do you feel Scored is holding up with the current dystopian craze? Well, it's hard to tell. Unfortunately, we authors don't tend to have any idea how our books are selling. I mean, I know what my Amazon ranking is, but I don't really know what it's selling in bookstores, so I really don't know. What I've heard through the grapevine is that people tend to see it as more of a book of ideas in a sense, closer to reality, closer to the current world, rather than a sort of fantastical escape, the way a lot of dystopian novels are. So I think it fits in a different niche from the niches that a lot of the other dystopians are filling, and I kind of like that. I think it's somebody called it the sort of thinking reader's dystopian book, and I kind of like that. Houston Library says it is more pressing because of that. Yes, absolutely, and I believe that I think that oftentimes people underestimate the intellectual life of teenagers. I think they are capable of engaging on the level of ideas as much as they are on the level of sort of chasing and kissing and romance. And for me, what's really exciting is when there are interpersonal relationships between characters that engage on a kind of like romantic level, on an emotional level, but also on an intellectual level. I think that just deepens it and gives it so much more consequence. Those are the kind of books I like to read, and those are the kind of books I like to write. Houston Library asks, what can you disclose about your next projects? Are they dystopian too? Well, it's a very interesting question because my next project is a novel called Ashland, which began as a prequel to Scored, but has mutated into something completely different, something that has a sort of life of its own. I originally wanted to set it in the juvenile detention facility that became the proving ground for the software program at the heart of Scored. But I wound up being so fascinated by the lives of juvenile offenders in real juvenile detention facilities that it became a present-day story about what it's like to go through juvenile justice, basically. But yes, it is dystopian because that world is a dystopian world. It is a world of randomness and unfairness and excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. It's an unfair world where merit is not rewarded and justice doesn't really have a chance. So in that sense, it is dystopian, but it's also realistic. I don't know if I'll write any more classical dystopian novels. I never really know what I'm going to write until I start writing it. Theron writes, have you heard of college athletes being forced to friend an athletics teacher coach on Facebook for monitoring? Ooh, yes, I have heard of this. I've heard of all kinds of strange things happening on Facebook, authorized by Facebook and through Facebook. There are so many different ways that we can monitor each other. There's so many different ways parents, teachers, etc. can monitor us. And again, I think it's so seductive that we rarely say no. And I worry about it. I think it's something that we need to really keep an eye out for. Can you get me some water? Sorry. Houston Library asks, your female protagonists often focus so much of their energy on living up to outside expectations rather than being themselves. Why do they do that? Yes, I think you're referring to Imani, the main character of Scored, who wants to have a good score so she can go to college and sort of live up to, well, her own expectations, but also her parents' expectations, and also Jill from Cycler, who basically perverts her whole life just so that she can conform to society's understanding of what a normal, perfect girl is. As to why I always do that, that's a pretty deep psychological question, and it probably has something to do with the fact that I may have been like that as a teenager. Um, I think teenagers are under constant pressure to live up to other people's expectations of them. And those expectations are often at odds with each other. They have their friends' expectations, their parents' expectations, their teachers' expectations. They have, college admissions expectations of them. And then their own, if they have time, if they have the sort of peace of mind to actually develop their own expectations, then there's that as well. Um, so I think you can't write about teenagers without focusing on that to some extent. Houston Library says, but Raimi and Imani's friend are much more comfortable doing their own things without worry. Yes, true, of course. I like to think. Someone asked me once who am I most like? Am I most like Jill or Raimi from Cycler? Am I most like Imani or Katie from Scored? And I like to think that I'm the rebel, or that I was the rebel, but I really wasn't. Not in high school, certainly. I wouldn't say I was a conformist, but I would say that I was a good girl. I sort of did what was expected of me. I became a rebel later in life. And I think it's really great when you have a friend like that who can kind of be a yin to your yang. Theron asks, have you seen the anime Ranma One Half? Cycler made me immediately think of it. I haven't seen it, and I know I should. And I've been saying I know I should for a long time because a lot of people have brought it up. Apparently, there's a whole tradition in manga, I think, of gender cycling, of hermaphrodite cycling, or gender swapping, which I'm completely unaware of, which sounds really interesting. But I haven't been in the world of Cycler for a while because I wrote 2 books and then I moved on, and I'm probably not going to write a third. So no, I haven't read it yet, but I'd like to. These are really good questions, by the way. Thank you. I'm sorry that I keep losing my voice. I'm getting a cold. Houston Library asks, what is your writing process like when you're between novels? I am rarely between novels. That's the thing. Usually when I've finished one, I already have another one lined up. I have either already outlined it, or I'm midway through outlining it, or I at least have an idea of what I'm gonna write. So usually what I'll do is I'll just spend some time free writing, seeing if I've got enough raw material to produce an actual novel. You need to know your characters really well. You need to believe that this is a world that you're going to want to live in for a year, because that's how long it takes. It takes me at least a year to write a novel. So I really just spend time kind of suffusing myself in the world and in the characters and figuring out whether there's enough there. Theron asks, how much has music influenced your writing? What artists and songs? I always listen to music when I write. It's how I block out the outside world and hone my concentration. When I'm really struggling with concentration, I actually listen to Bach. For some reason, that I think it's other people have noticed this, that Bach does something to your mind. It sort of gets you in a kind of focused Zen-like state so that you can block everything else out. But I don't think I write like Bach. What I usually do is I put together a playlist for every draft of every novel, and it consists of songs that kind of get me in the right mood. For Scored, I spent a lot of time listening to Mozart's Requiem because it seemed appropriate. It had that kind of dark, ominous sense to it. And then when I was spending a lot of time writing the more romantic scenes between Imani and Diego, I had to come up with a more romantic playlist, and I wish I could remember what was on it. There was a lot of Radiohead on it. I can't remember, maybe Travis or something. I can't remember. But I don't really know how they influence my writing. They certainly influence my mood. And I can't imagine not having music as a kind of crutch to rely on. And I can be distracted by music. Like if I'm writing something and the music just feels wrong, I have to change it because it can really send me off in the wrong direction, and it's a horrible thing. So yeah, music is important. I think it's true for most writers. Most writers have a playlist that I know of, anyways. Have a playlist for each novel. Sometimes they publish those playlists. I've never done that. Um, Houston Library asks, how does your background in screenwriting affect your novel writing? I spent 10 years as a screenwriter, and when I switched to writing fiction, it was very hard to break the habits that I had developed as a screenwriter. Screenwriting is sparse. It's just dialogue and action. There's very little interiority. You have to be able to tell the story exclusively with dialogue and action and leave room for the director and the actors and whatnot to kind of flesh it out the way they see fit. With a novel, you have to provide everything to the reader because that's the complete experience. It's not going to be interpreted by other people. It's will be interpreted by the reader using their own imagination. Um, so I had to unlearn a lot of the habits that I developed as a screenwriter. I had to think of interiority. I had to describe worlds in much more detail. As a screenwriter, you don't describe somebody's living room unless there's a reason for a couch to be a certain way. You leave that to the production designer. My first draft of my very first novel, I remember sending it to an agent, and she said, well, this is a really cool story, but I don't see the spaceship. It was a space opera. And she said, I don't know what the spaceship looks like. And I said, well, I want the reader to bring their own ideas of what a spaceship should look like to it. And she said, no, 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 no. You have to create the world for your reader. And that was one of the best bits of feedback I got from an agent. And I remember my novel went from being something like 60,000 words to 90,000 words after I realized that. I think the one lingering gift I bring with me as a novelist from screenwriting is story structure, because screenplays are very carefully structured, usually in 3 acts, sometimes 5 acts, but you have very, very little time to tell a story, and you have to keep it moving. So you have to be very disciplined in terms of the structure, and I try to take that with me in my novels. I want to hook people early, and I want to keep them on the edge of their seat till the end of the novel. That's what I strive to do, and I think my background in screenwriting has really helped with that, with pacing and suspense and that sort of thing. Theron writes, as a fiction author, do you still read many fiction books? Who are your favorite authors? I read fiction books constantly. It's my favorite thing to read. The reason I write novels is because I love reading novels. My favorite authors, well, that's something that changes all the time. Lately, I've been really loving, I love Meg Rosoff. I love Cynthia Wilson. I love Jennifer Egan. I love William Gibson. I love Ian McEwan. I think Justine Larbalestier is really great. Scott Westerfeld, Cory Doctorow, Robin Wasserman. There's so many great, particularly great young adult authors out there. But I also, I love Jane Austen. I love Faulkner. I like to read. I like to read in lots of different genres. I like to read from different time periods. I just love to read. Houston Library asks, what have your experiences been with rejection of your writing? They've been stinky. They've been horrible. I hate being rejected. There's nothing worse. It's tough. You get rejected a lot. When I started writing fiction, let's see if I get the time frame right here. I quit my job as a producer and screenwriter to write fiction, thinking I would finish my novel within the year and sell it, and that would be it. I'd be a novelist from now on. I never sold that novel, so that was rejected comprehensively. I wrote another one, which I never finished. And in the meantime, I wrote a number of short stories. Probably I wrote, I'm going to say 10 to 12 short stories, and I only sold three. And each one that was rejected, and even the ones that were accepted, were rejected multiple times. So yeah, I was dealing with rejection on a monthly, maybe sometimes even weekly basis. And I would go through these phases with rejection. And it's kind of like the what they call it, the five stages of grief, 5 stages of rejection. I don't know if there's 5 stages, but the stages of rejection were disbelief. How could this person reject this story, this novel? It's ridiculous. And then I would feel sort of like I would pity them. I would think, oh well, they really just don't know what they're doing. Clearly they have no idea what they're doing. And then I would get I'd just get angry. Um, and then eventually I would just accept it and maybe make some changes and send it out and move on. Um, you have to just deal with rejection. Everybody does, no matter how successful they are. They've been rejected, and even once you've been successful, you might still get rejected. I've been lucky since I sold my first novel. I've sold the next two. But yeah, and I've sold a picture book too. But who knows? That could change. I could be rejected tomorrow. Um, you just never know. You have to have a thick skin. That's really important. Well, you don't have to have a thick skin, but if you, it helps. It helps an awful lot. Um, Darren asks, if monitoring and scoring became commonplace, how do you think it would affect reality television? How long do you think it would take before that footage were licensed for TV or movies and a bit of instant fame? Lots of interesting ideas in that question. First among them being, will there be a concept of fame if everybody is surveilled all the time? What makes famous people famous is the fact that they're rare, that there aren't that many people that you watch on TV. But if you can watch everybody all the time, then maybe there won't be any more fame. And maybe reality television won't be necessary because you'll just tune in. You'll just tune in to Facebook and people will be living their lives. The people will have cameras throughout their homes and allow you to just see what they're doing. I confess, I've often thought it would be really easy for me to stay in touch with my family and friends abroad if I just had cameras everywhere and I could just like snap my fingers and say, "Mom, are you there?" and like see her on a screen somewhere. And I honestly wouldn't mind if my family could sort of see me in my house, but obviously I'd have problems with that if like the government could see me or just anyone could see me. But there are plenty of people who would do that. There's a documentary um, called "We Live in Public," which was made. I think it was made about maybe 10 years ago or something. Um, but it's still pretty relevant. It's about this guy and his girlfriend who lived in public. They brought surveillance cameras into their home and just webcast everything they did. And it was an experiment. And I think it turned out that not that many people wanted to watch because ultimately it wasn't that interesting to watch somebody vacuuming. Um, so I think your question about reality television becomes more interesting because what if if you're in your everyday life, if you knew you were being watched, you felt like you had to be funnier, you had to be prettier, you had to do more interesting things. Maybe you wouldn't watch so much TV because you didn't want people to be bored who were watching you. Um, I think it could be very interesting, and that's one of the interesting things about surveillance is its ability to possibly, potentially, inspire us to be the kinds of people we want people to see us as, which is scary, but at the same time, it has its upside too. Um, WebZip1277 asks, what methods, tools, etc. do you use to capture, remember ideas before forgetfulness sets in? Oh, golly. Um, I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and run around searching for a notebook to write things down because I know if I don't, it'll be gone. It'll be gone by the morning. It happens all the time. I call myself and leave messages. I voice record things. I have a variety of notebooks in different places with scraps of ideas. And the problem is I usually write it down and then forget that I've written it down. And then later I'll be just, trying to write down someone's phone number, and I'll come across this idea, this bit of dialogue or a story idea that I wrote 6 months ago and think, oh yeah, I was going to do something with that. Um, so I constantly write things down, but I'm not so great at keeping track of them. But I always have many, many, many things going at once. I'll be writing one novel, and I'll be making notes and ideas for another novel. And when I've finished one, if I don't already know what my next novel is going to be or what my next project is going to be, I'll look through on my hard drive. I have a kind of like a file of proposed ideas, unwritten ideas, and I just figure out which one seems the most likely, and I'll work on that. WebZip1277 asks, do you find that kind of serendipitous discovery helps or hinders your writing? Helps and hinders. The thing about writing is that, for me anyways, is that you have to walk a really fine line between planning out your story and leaving yourself open to possibilities, to that serendipity that you're talking about. Because if everything is too carefully planned, it feels contrived. And I think as a reader, what I want is I want to be brought along on a journey that makes sense, but that surprises me constantly. And I think if you outline everything in the beginning and then just stick to it, that means you haven't allowed serendipity, and you haven't allowed your characters to flesh themselves out and be real and to surprise you. So it's very important. But every time you do that, every time you stray from your outline, it's a nightmare. It's a house of cards. It just tears everything apart, and you end up in trouble. You end up going down blind alleys. You end up with these subplots that grow out of proportion and consume the whole book, and then you have to tear them out and start over. It's a nightmare. it's it's a hard way to write, but it's, in my opinion, it's the only way to write. If you know the whole thing before you start writing, then it's not going to be worth reading. That's my opinion. I like to be surprised as a reader, and I think the writer has to be surprised to deliver that kind of experience. Houston Library asks, if you could recommend any one book to teens who don't like books, what would you suggest? Oh, gosh, that's a great question. Who don't like books? I guess it would depend on why they don't like books. I read a story recently about this high school teacher who was teaching, I think it was in New York City, in a pretty rough neighborhood, and he was trying to teach his kids Hamlet, and they just couldn't get into it. So he taught them the book Monster by, I just blanked on his name. Is it Walter Mosley? Maybe somebody there can do a Google search or something. And his kids just went crazy. Like, all of a sudden, they realized that they were reading about people who were like them, and it opened something up in them. And then once they could do that, they could read other things, because now they felt that reading had value. So I think for some kids, it's getting them a book about characters who are like them so that they can relate to them directly. I think for other kids, it's about getting them a book that takes them out of their reality and shows them a kind of fantastical world that they've never conceived of. And I wish I could come up with one book, but I really can't. I mean, you could pick the most popular book out there. You could pick The Hunger Games. You could pick Harry Potter. You could pick Twilight, because these books have turned on so many people to reading that there's a good chance they would turn on any kid to reading. But I think you have to know the kid. I really do. I think you have to figure out what it is that he or she is missing from books, and then find a book that will fill that gap. And they're out there. There's so many. There's so many different types of reading experiences to have. Therein, a question in 3 parts. How do you feel about audiobooks? Publishers who record them without the author knowing, and would you record one of your books if asked? I love audiobooks. I actually listened to The Golden Compass on audio, and it was great narration, and I absolutely loved it. Publishers who record them without the author knowing, I had not heard of that. that seems odd. I guess if an author signs away all of her rights, then I guess they can do anything they want. But you'd think they'd want the author to know. And would I record one of my books if asked? I wouldn't personally record it because I'm not an actor, and I think I'd want actors to do it. I am contemplating doing this on my own for Cycler, because I think Cycler would make a great audiobook. I think that the dueling voices of Jack and Jill would be really interesting. So I'm actually auditioning people for that right now. And as for Scored, my agent's submitting it to some people, some audiobook companies, I think, and I don't really know where we are. So yeah, I think I think they will all be made into audiobooks, and I think it's great because some people don't want to read a book on a page. They want to listen to a book while they're driving to work, or while they're on the treadmill, or while they're walking to school. There's no reason why you shouldn't do that. It's just another opportunity to reach people with your stories. So I think they're great. Walter Dean Myers, thank you. That was the name I was looking for. Houston Library asks, the Teen Tech Week theme this year is Geek Out at Your Library. What do you like to geek out about? Oh boy. Where should I start? I like to geek out about all kinds of things. I like to geek out about surveillance, obviously, and I like to geek out about near future technological progress, about where we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, what it's going to look like. I like to make predictions. I like to read other people's predictions. I like to look at past predictions and see how wrong they were, because I think that's really telling. It tells you about the kind of ethos of that historical period. I like to geek out about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and anything having to do with human behavior and human psychology, in particular as it relates to technology and the internet. I'm sure there's lots of other things I can geek out about. I can geek out about baking, actually. I love to bake, and I have opinions about baking, so I can do that too. Houston Library also said that the author I was thinking of was Walter Dean Myers. And Monster, yeah, Monster is a great book, and I think a wonderful book to introduce to certain readers who don't think they want to read, because it's been tried and tested to really turn people onto reading. How Houston Library asks, how far off do you think the singularity is? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And maybe we're already in it. For those of you who don't know what the singularity is, different people define it in different ways, but some people see it as the moment when, basically when software becomes sentient. Other people see it as the moment when technological progress advances at such a rapid rate that those of us who are on the wrong side of that curve are left behind forever, and it's the moment of extreme future shock. I think Ray Kurzweil is one of the most interesting figures in talking about the singularity, and he believes it's going to happen in our lifetime. He thinks that there's a good chance that he will live forever because he's just barely young enough to be able to sort of surf that wave as it comes. I don't know. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced we're going to make it. I think that it might be the next generation that does, but we'll see. We'll see. Theron, oh man, have you heard about NLP being used to pick up women? Yes, I have. I have, Theron. I have read The Game by Neil Strauss. I have been to NLP websites where dudes talk about using NLP to pick up women, and it is an abysmal, sad affair. But nevertheless interesting. It's taking this amazing theory and putting it into practice in ways that I find devious and sad. Because why would you want to be with someone that you've tricked into being with you? That's just so sad. But at the same time, the fact that there are so many books and websites devoted to men using NLP to pick up women means that's an incredible data pool out there for the effectiveness of NLP. And if you can sort of hold your nose and read these books and websites, you can gain a lot of intriguing insight into the psychology of women and men and just of people in general. Um, but I don't recommend using NLP to pick up women. I think you should just be the best kind of person you can be. And, that's much better. But The Game is an interesting book. The thing is, I find it hard to believe that is it Mystique or Mystery, the guy that it's based on, actually does do well with women. It's astonishing to me that he's successful with women because he's so phony. I feel like I would see that coming a mile away, and it just wouldn't work. And it's surprising to me um, that so many women don't see it coming. I think as NLP becomes more and more popular, it's just not going to work anymore. Um, Even recently, I remember reading, I think it was on Facebook, some woman telling a story about a guy who had said some very strange and negative thing to her at a bar while he was trying to pick her up, and a bunch of people commented on her Facebook status saying, "Oh, you've just been negged," which is a big tactic that men use to pick up women when they're using NLP. You say something negative to the woman that puts you above her and makes her look up to you, and therefore it makes you more desirable. Really twisted. Not the basis for a rewarding relationship, in my opinion. Webzip1277 asks, how do you deal with writer's block? I don't know because I've never had it. I've had problems. I've written myself into obstacles that I didn't think I could get around and hit walls and gone down blind alleys because of all of that serendipity stuff. But I've never had writer's block. I've always had something to write. Houston Library says, lucky. It is lucky. I don't know what I would do. I feel like so much of my identity is wrapped up in being a writer that if I wasn't writing, I'm not sure I'd know what I was. um, but being trapped in a web of your own making as a writer it's got to be just as bad as writer's block because it's a nightmare. Especially like right now, I'm doing a major rewrite of this novel Ashland, which I talked about earlier, and it's not. I don't have writer's block. I know what I'm writing and I know what I need to do to finish it, but it's really kind of a nightmare being trapped in a story that you've written because you're attached to everything. You have to throw out whole passages, whole chapters that you're totally in love with, but that don't work anymore, and you have to sort of reconceive of things. It's very difficult. Um, so I think that can probably be just as bad as writer's block. But yeah, I'm glad I've never had writer's block. Maybe if I had writer's block, I would do something else. I don't know. I don't know what I'd do though. I'm not really so great at anything else. Not anymore. Houston Library asks, do you ever have to turn around from the corner you've written yourself into? How do you do it? I do often have to turn around from the corner I've written myself into. The way I do it, usually if I find that I'm just sort of like in that corner and running in place and bashing my head against the wall, I have to stop and go away, take a day or two off, and it's usually after I've had some distance from it that the answer comes to me. And sometimes it's really simple, and sometimes it's just that a section won't work and it has to be cut, and you just have to think of something else. But there's no surefire method for dealing with those situations. Um, it's amazing how blind you can be sometimes to the errors that you're making while you're making them, and it just takes time and perspective to see them and to sort of work your way out of them. Webzip1277 says, when you say trapped, do you mean that it's going away from the direction you originally intended? No, I don't mean that, because my books always go away from the direction I originally intended. And that's not a problem. That's the journey. That's what keeps it fresh and interesting and keeps me surprised as a writer and therefore hopefully keeps you surprised as a reader. That's good. When I say trapped, what I mean is um, I've taken the story down a particular path, and now I have nowhere to go. And now if I already have an idea of how I want this story to end, but I've gone down this direction, how am I going to get from point A to point B? That's the hard part. The other way you get yourself trapped is you characters. It's not as if I have a character that's completely thought out, and then I put it in the story and then see what happens. The character fleshes out as the story is written. So sometimes you think you know who your character is in the beginning, and then the more you write, the more you get to know him or her, they start refusing to do the things that you need them to do in order to tell your story because they have fully fleshed out personalities now, and they sort of say, I wouldn't do that. Or if you try to make them do that, it just reads as false. That's a trap. And that's something you have to work your way out of. That means you have to reconceive your story. And that can be, again, like a house of cards. Um, Theron says, would you ever be watched taped while writing as an art project? Do you think it would be entertaining for the public to watch writing as art being created? I don't, no, I wouldn't, because I don't really want people watching me. Um, I don't think it would be interesting to watch a writer writing, because I'll tell you, this is what it looks like. That's it. There's nothing more to it. It's really boring. But I think what would be interesting um, is to watch the screen of a writer's computer as they're writing. I'd love to take one of my favorite writers and watch them in real time as the words were appearing on the page. I'd like to see the difference between the sentence as it's first written and then as she rewrites it. I'd love to know, Jennifer Egan, for example, are her first drafts really rough and wordy and horrible sounding, and then do they slowly get polished and magical, or does she complete a sentence and make it perfect before she moves on to the next sentence? I think that could be interesting. It would interest me because I'm a writer, and it would probably interest some hardcore fans of particular writers, but I don't see it on prime time. I don't think it would be interesting to a wider audience. Theron Harlan Theron says Harlan Ellison famously did it in a bookstore window for the Today Show. Yes, I've heard of people doing that. I've heard of a few other people doing that in bookstore windows. And I think when you're of the stature of Harlan Ellison, then it's basically just gawking at a celebrity. I mean, it could be anyone sitting in a window. If they're famous, some people are going to want to watch them. I didn't see Harlan Ellison doing that, so I don't know if he does particularly interesting things while he's writing. Um, but yeah, it's not something I would necessarily want to see, and not something I'd want to do. Houston Library asks, how much of yourself is written into your characters? Undoubtedly more than I realize. I'm not a shrink, so it's hard to say, really. But when I've been asked which of my characters is the most like me, I always answer Jack from Cycler, because I feel more connected to him than any other character. Um, he's like my id. um, I borrow from all kinds. I borrow from everybody I've ever met. I borrow from basically to create these characters, and I wouldn't say that I consciously piece them together um, in any particular way, but I just feel like everyone I know and everyone I've met is kind of flowing through me, and they manifest themselves in fictional characters in a variety of ways. Sometimes the analogs are very close, and sometimes a character is just a kind of loose mishmash of a variety of different people. But sometimes characters come to me fully formed, and I feel like I know them intimately right away. And other times they're very mysterious. Imani, the main character in Scored, was mysterious. It took me a long time to get to know her. Whereas Diego, um, her sort of the co-lead of the book, I felt like I knew him right away. I felt like he sort of jumped out at me um, quickly, and I felt like I knew him. And I don't really know why that happens. There's a lot of this whole process that is not consciously controlled. That's what makes it exciting and really irritating. Theron asks, "What's your favorite technology today, and what are you most looking forward to in the near future?" Well, I do like my Kindle. I love that I can read pretty lengthy samples of books for free without committing to buying, because I'm an impatient reader. I don't finish the majority of novels that I start, so it's really great to be able to do that. I think it's a really interesting piece of technology, actually, that I certainly didn't predict. Even when people were talking about e-ink and e-readers, I don't think anyone fully predicted that it would work out that way. So I think those are pretty interesting. Um, I think everything having to do with the internet is interesting because I feel like we're still in the very early days of it, and we don't know yet where it's going to take us. And I say where it's going to take us because I really feel that it is that way. I don't think that we are in control. I don't think any one individual or even one group of individuals is in control of this. I believe we are being carried along on a kind of wave. Um, it's our collective unconscious, and it's the demands of the technology itself that are determining where we're going on this wave, and I don't think any of us can really predict it. That's scary to me and also incredibly exciting, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. Um, what am I looking most forward to in the near future? Hmm. Well, I guess we're not going to get jetpacks after all, which I'm really kind of angry about. Um, I would love some technology that does away with automobiles forever. I hate cars. I really hate cars. I think maybe moving sidewalks or, I don't know, maglev or something, monorails, I don't know, anything other than cars. A car killing technology. That would be my ideal technology because I hate them. And I live in a city, so I don't really need one. And I get car sick. That's why I don't like cars. Theron asks, "Do you think if gender changing were easy and readily available, it would become a recreational activity?" Absolutely, of course. I think a huge percentage of the population would gladly swap gender if they knew they could get back. Plenty of people do swap gender and they don't go back. Um, I think if it was something recreational, something temporary, something playful, people would absolutely do it. I know I would. Why not? Um, I think it's fascinating that that we can't do that. That there's something so biological about it that we can't. Because I believe gender is a cultural construct as much as it is a biological fact. Um, and our concept of gender changes so radically over time that what we consider, for example, feminine today would have been unrecognizable to our great grandparents. We'd probably look at almost every woman today and think that we were unfeminine because we didn't live up to their understanding of femininity, nor would today's men live up to the standards of masculinity from a century ago. Um, it changes, culture changes it. But yet we, for the most part, are biologically trapped in the gender that we're born in. I think that's a really interesting dichotomy, and that's why I find gender such a fascinating topic to write about. It's fluid, but at the same time, it's static. Webzip1277 asks, "What is your most significant memory from being a young adult? And have you written about it?" Oh boy. um, oh. Well, it would be hard to say what my single most significant memory would be. There are a number of incidents that would compete for that title. Um, I will say the opening of Cycler, for those of you who've read it, was based on my the sense of my real experiences um, of what it felt like to be female, of what it felt like to undergo that monthly trauma. Um, so I did write about it. I just took what was a rather mundane but horrendous experience, and I turned it into this kind of fantastical journey because I can. As an author, I guess that's the freedom we have to do that. I also have a number of memories from my youth of being. Um, I have this bizarre phobia. I'm afraid of butterflies. Um, I don't know why. It's just one of those weird, messed up signal crossing things in my brain. I'm terrified of butterflies and caterpillars. Um, and I have a number of memories of being paralyzed with fear in the face of a caterpillar or butterfly. Um, I grew up in New England, and we would have these horrible infestations of gypsy moths and tent caterpillars, and it would be hard for me to even go out of the house at times. And I have finally written about it. It's for a novel that I've just begun, um, which is about lepidopterophobia. It's about fear of butterflies, and it's about a journey that this young person goes on in overcoming fear of butterflies. And I'm going to leave it at that because I don't know where that story is going to go yet. But yes, I've written about it. I don't know if it will end up being finished into a novel, but yeah, I have written about that. Theron asks, how would you feel if you learned that one or more of your books were banned from schools? I would feel terrible. Unfortunately, with book bannings, you don't hear about most of them. I remember when I first sold Cycler, I was warned by my publisher that this book was going to be banned because it's a gender bending story. It questions gender norms. There's a bisexual character in it, and so I thought that having your book banned meant that there would be a big media firestorm and there'd be letters written and newspaper articles and all of that. And really, that does happen. That does certainly happen. But for the most part, when a book is banned, it's just quietly removed from the shelf. Nobody ever hears about it. No student ever even knows it's there. A librarian picks a book, puts it on a shelf, and a parent complains, and it's just quietly removed. So yes, I would be horrified. I would be horrified if I heard that it was banned, but I wouldn't be surprised because I had a feeling that Scored would run into problems, and not Scored, Cycler. I had a feeling Cycler would run into problems, and Scored I didn't think would run into problems, except there's a bit of language, which I know is a problem for some people. Not a lot of harsh language. I don't actually use a lot of swearing, but I know that can get you into trouble. Anytime a book is banned, I feel terrible. I trust librarians. I think they're really good at making these decisions for themselves. And if you don't like a book that's at the library, then you don't have to check it out. So I don't think there's any need to ban books. I think it's a waste of time. Houston Library asks, Cycler brings up a lot of unusual relationship potentials, but does not veer into them at all. How do you think its acceptance would change if Jack and Jill were involved differently with their significant others? I think it would be problematic. Yes. The thing when you have a story where for those of you who haven't read Cycler, it's the story of a teenage girl who turns into a boy 4 days out of every month. And when she's a girl, she is very attracted to this guy named Tommy Knudsen. When she's a boy, Jack, he's attracted to this girl named Rainey. Obviously, there's all kinds of opportunity for that to crisscross. And in fact, there is a little bit of play there in Cycler. But for the most part, it's about a girl trying desperately to conform to heterosexual female norms, even though her body is protesting, even though her body is leading her elsewhere. And what I was trying to get at was the fact that we all have something inside us that we're embarrassed about, that is inconvenient. And it's about the damage that we do to ourselves when we try to repress those things. Um, so the reason most of the relationships in that book are heterosexual is because it's very much a novel about conformity and the dangers of conformity. I think if I had, you can take a premise like that and you can write so many different stories. And I hope somebody does. I think it would be so great. You could just really run with that idea. But yeah, she could be, she could be attracted to the same person when she's male and when she's female. You can have all kinds of interesting things. I think if I had done that, it probably would have gotten into more trouble. But on the other hand, it may have found a new audience as well. People who are hungry for that. And in fact, a number of readers said that they wish that it had gone further in exploring those possibilities. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't hold back. I would do that if that's where I thought the book wanted to go. It just didn't feel like that's where that story wanted to go. Houston Library asked, any last things you'd like to tell the audience? Anything you wished we'd asked that we didn't? No, you guys asked really, really good questions. And I'm glad that nobody asked me what I scored on my SATs because I don't remember. I remember being terrified of taking them, and I honestly don't remember what I scored on them. And that's a really important point. Actually, that's what I want to leave you with. It doesn't matter what you get on your SATs. No matter what you think, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you go to college. It matters that you learn as much as you can from wherever you go, from life, from school, from everything. Because the further you get away from those college years or those high school years or whatever, the less those kinds of status things matter. I'm a middle-aged person, so I feel like I can say that with some authority to all the teenagers out there who are currently worrying about their SATs and their college applications and their, ACTs and all the other standardized testing that you're going to be subjected to. Hopefully, the world will not become like the world of Scored, and these things won't matter. And if it does become like the world of Scored, you won't be taking SATs anyways. You'll just be scored all the time. We'll see. Thank you for listening to me. It was a real joy, and I hope we can do it again sometime. Cheers. Thanks, Theron. It was great chatting with you. Bye-bye.